I used to think that changing your life was a big dramatic event. I guess this was kind of reinforced by a lot of movies and social media, and I guess just parts of life as well. And also, I think it had to do with lower self esteem as well, like thinking that I had to be somewhere better, not feeling good enough where I was at that moment. And recently, I found that that's completely false. Like, changing your life, so to speak, is quite dull and boring because that's what real life is. And that's a part of becoming an adult, is realizing that, basically you're going to spend most of your days reasonably the same depending on what kind of work you do. And I was always chasing these answers, chasing these big dreams, dreaming up big things, making big plans, trying to make the perfect plan. And I never seemed to be able to stick with anything. And that just further made me feel more doubt and more regret and more guilt within myself because I could see other people were doing it. I could read about other people doing it. I could see how people's stories and they faced these obstacles and then they became better for it. And I wasn't becoming better for it. I didn't feel like I was becoming better for it. I felt like I was just going through this cycle of dreaming up these big kind of dreams, thinking of these things, and then not being able to stick to it for a couple of weeks, and then feeling like a complete loser because I just spent weeks just sitting in my room or just playing video games and watching TV shows and, just numbing myself out basically. And I think a major part of this for me was actually not finding out what worked for my body, what worked for me. And I would always try and do too much because I felt like I had to do so much to reach this potential that I felt like I had. And potential is such like a vague concept that isn't really concrete. So I've almost dismissed it now because it's not tangible and it's not very useful to think of. It just makes you think of what could be and rather than realizing like what is. And that's the most important thing because the truth is almost always simple, but it's never easy. So I found that my nervous system wasn't able to tolerate this much distress. I was trying to work a full time job, or I was trying to, when I was in Wollongong for 6 weeks a few years ago, um, I thought I'd try my hand at soccer because that was something that I wanted to. That's something that I had dreamed of doing. That was one of my big goals in life. And I didn't really reflect and think of would this actually fit me? And I felt very disjointed in that situation. Like, I love playing the game, I love it, that kind of thing. But I didn't mind the day to day training, but the excess of it and feeling this obligation, like these people, like you have to show up to these games, you have to show up. Why aren't you performing? I just felt like I was being constricted to try and play this role rather than be myself and express myself. And I think that's one of the best and most important things you can do in your life because it's easy to put on a show, it's easy to follow what's the course of things, but it's very hard to try and forge your own path and to face the insecurity and doubts that come going down that path because it's dark and you don't know exactly where it's going to go, but just taking that next step and walking in faith. And that's what I've learned in these past 29 days now. I've done this lower stimulation protocol and I've dropped back my work so that my nervous system has more time to kind of regulate and to digest these kind of things, to kind of signal to it that it's in this state of rest and digest rather than always going in anxiety because there's a flow on and knock on effect from work, which I've talked about in previous videos. And so I've dropped back to work to 3 or 4 days a week, and it's been really amazing. And I feel kind of guilty because society would tell you that you have to work 5 days at least a week, and you have to be saving so much money, and you have to be making so much money to earn living in this kind of life. But I wasn't satisfied or I wasn't fulfilled at all, and I was slowly but surely burning myself out and just getting completely drained because I wasn't enjoying the work. It wasn't aligned with my values, and I was just trying to grit my way through it because I thought that, oh, maybe just grit's the way to go through it. And I was listening to David Goggins' book, Can't Hurt Me, and then I was like, all right, I'm going to have to find time from outside of work. I'm going to have to get up at 4, and then I'm going to have to work out for an hour and a half, and then do this and do that, and then stretch for an hour and a half at night. And I was always going, always moving, and I was never allowing myself to settle and think of whether this was actually making me happy. And eventually I burnt out because I was just doing all these things, and my body couldn't keep up with it. I got a quad injury, and then it all fell apart, and I realized that I didn't have any internal sense of strength. I was focused on all these external kind of concepts. I was like, yeah, I'm going to change my life. I'm going to listen to David Goggins, and I'm going to use this to reinforce myself, to make myself really hard like he is, because that's what I wanted to be. But I was focused so much on the external things that I wasn't listening and digesting my internal sense. And that's always going to come up regardless of that. And I hate saying it, but you really need to listen to these internal senses, even though it seems silly, like, oh, I shouldn't listen to my feelings, but you can act with your feelings. And I've always been someone who's more sensitive and a bit more emotional and a bit more receptive to things. So I need a tighter environment. I need more constraint than a lot of people to feel better and to get things done and feel productive in my life. And I need a lot of rest time in between the activities. Like I need white space and just laying on the floor to kind of let it digest, rather than what I was doing, which was feeding the loop of always consuming all of these things. And I didn't really have a strong sense of self. I didn't feel like I had any direction. And honestly, I think that was why I was feeling quite suicidal a lot of the times and not wanting to be alive, because I didn't see much point in going on. I didn't, it felt like I was banging my head again and again against a wall, and that there was like really no hope for me. And that just made me want to further escape even more. And then that made me feel even worse about my life, because I was numbing all these feelings rather than letting them kind of unravel and just sitting with them. And it hasn't been easy, honestly. It's not easy to sit with these things. But if I've found that just giving myself the space and not filling it in with all these things, just all these dreams and aspirations, and just picking a few things, picking a few projects. So I picked drawing, I picked guitar, and I picked juggling on my days off. And then my workouts, I've just kept that at a maintenance at the moment. And then apart from that, I read a fiction book. I've been reading Brandon Sanderson's Stormlight Archives, and it's really great. It's been really fitting for this kind of time. It got recommended to me by my old boss from the arborist business that I was working for, so thank you for that. But a lot of the time, just sitting and digesting these feelings and eating the same food every day, like just having a consistent sleep cycle, going to bed at the same time, waking up at the same time, and then eating good food, same time every day, eating well before I go to sleep, at least 3 hours before I go to bed, and then just having a lot of time to kind of sit and rest and not stimulating myself all the time, just letting the things kind of flow. And in those moments, I experienced a lot of discomfort, like crazy discomfort. Like I'm surprised that I got through it, honestly, because I've tried this so many times in the past. And I was just thinking today that it's crazy that I've done 29 days of this, and that I probably could have done it earlier if I had have been more strategic about it, and rather than being strict. Because when I had tried it before, I was very strict. I was like, I'm not going to do anything. I'm just going to stare at a wall all day for all my spare time. And that's just kind of ridiculous. Like, you need to go on a walk. You need to move your body. You need to be eating good food. You can read a little bit. Like, that's not as stimulating as watching anime or watching a movie or whatever. But don't fill up all the time with reading, which is what I did when I did it a couple of years ago, I just filled up all my time with reading, and then eventually I just cracked. And honestly, I think a part of the strategy that's helped me is using ChatGPT, especially in the first few weeks. Whenever I had those cravings, I'd just write it out, and it would just kind of reinforce, oh, this is expected. It'll fall after a while. And when you're in it, it feels like this is everything. When you have those urges, when you have those moments of discomfort, it feels like this is everything, and I need to scratch that itch now, or else I'm not going to feel good ever again in my life. And how dramatic does that statement sound? It's never that crazy, but in that moment, it feels real, and that's an important thing to say. So changing your life is quite dull and boring. It's basically, for me, it's been doing very similar things, having a lot of downtime. And a part of it's almost felt easy because I have so much time in between. I'm not thinking that I have to do soccer for like 4 hours a day, or have to do 10,000 touches, or I have to learn a whole song and write a whole song out in a day and get it all done. It's just doing bits and pieces, what I can each day. And then after a couple weeks, you start to see progress, and then you get really kind of reinforced. You're like, wow, like I feel like I haven't been doing anything, but then I'm getting these results back from it. It's kind of amazing. Like life doesn't really have to suck. So I think I'll leave that there. Thank you for watching. And as you can see, I've changed the view. I'm going to change around my room a little bit, honestly. I feel like I need a change. But I felt like my other videos where I was standing up and facing the wall where the camera is at the moment, it was just kind of blank, and it was kind of representative of that time in my life. Like I was quite empty. I was just this empty soul that was just kind of going through the motions of things. Whereas I feel like it's kind of important to show a little bit of your environment to, like, not just because it's stimulating to look at, but because it like shows a bit about myself. Like, why did I choose that background for this? And then I've got like my drawing pad, and like you can see my guitar there, and you can see a bit of the posters up there. Like you can see a bit of my drink bottle, which is really big, and his name's Doug. And he says, "Cheers, mate," whenever you drink from him. That's kind of grotty. He's old. He's an old boy. But yeah, I'm gonna leave you with that. Thank you for watching, and good luck.